Good day, everyone. Today I'm going to show you my top 10 comic book covers. I've been watching some videos by members of the community who have been showing off their books. And some of them we have a lot in common. This was an event created by Grammaticus Books. The videos that I saw in particular were Mystery and Mayhem and Culture Fan. And some others that, I decided maybe I'll do this. The books I'm going to show you, the first 9, they're not in order. The last one I'm going to show you, I think, is my favorite cover of all time. But again, this stuff changes, right? So let's begin at the beginning. And so at number 10 is where the superhero genre basically began, the father of superheroes. And that is Lee Falk's The Phantom. Now, it was tough to choose a cover. And The Phantom's been with us since 1936, and it's still going on, rather strong, especially in Europe. And but it was just difficult to choose something, right? Some of the runners-up that I have, some of the early ones, is The Phantom has been with us for a long time. My fascination with him goes since I was a little boy. And as I've been reading him over the years, it's quite fascinating how writers, not just Lee Falk, but British writers, European writers, American writers, have really built on him, on his history. He's met William Shakespeare, he's met Miguel de Cervantes, he's met Abraham Lincoln. I think the second Phantom was married to the granddaughter of Christopher Columbus. And in this one in particular here, he meets Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid in Bolivia. But this cover here, I think just grabs me every time I see it. It's the image of him, and of course this pirate ship here, and which is basically how it all started with the Phantom, when the ship that he was on was attacked by pirates. Everyone was killed, including his father, except he survived. He washed ashore on an island, and then at that point he decided to become basically this avenging hero, and then his sons would take on the mantle. So whenever the Phantom dies, the Phantom is dead, long live the Phantom. That's why it's called the Ghost Who Walks, because it's presumed people in the circle know that he is mortal, but for the rest of the world, is this man really alive? He's for almost 500 years. So that's number 10. Let's see. Now the next one is Hugo Pratt. Hugo Pratt was an Italian artist and writer who did a lot of his early work in Argentina, and that's where he really came into his own. And then he went back to Italy, and one of his most famous creations is the Corto Maltese series of stories. If you like the Macrol books by Alvaro Mutis or the Joseph Conrad stories, you'll like these a lot. And just wonderful stuff by Hugo Pratt. Now, Pratt was influenced by Lee Falk, and by, of course, Milton Caniff. Now, I almost picked this cover here by Caniff, but I decided not to. Of course, Caniff is most famous for Terry and the Pirates. So Lee Falk and, of course, Caniff have had major influences, not just in comics, but comic strips, filmmakers, writers. He always comes up as an influence in some way. But back to Hugo Pratt. This is number 9. This is Kirk, a publication in 1968, this issue here. And this was reprinting of comic strips and American, European comic strips, including stuff by Hugo Pratt. But this cover is absolutely enchanting of this woman here. Mesmerizing. Absolutely mesmerizing. So, the great Hugo Pratt. Now, to number 8. Picking something from the Warren magazines was definitely tough. Vampirella, eerie, creepy. Those of you familiar with those magazines know it's going to be tough. But when it comes to The Spirit by Warren publications and just the beauty of Will Eisner, this issue here is the one I usually look at quite a bit. Now, it's a wraparound cover, as some of these early kitchen sink reprints are. I think it's 1979, I think. But Eisner was a master. Huge influence on Frank Miller. I mean, Frank Miller took the idea from a story from The Spirit for the Elektra origin in Daredevil. But Eisner comes in the tradition, again, of Lee Falk, Milton Caniff, and such. And again, Hugo Pratt was also influenced by Eisner in turn. Now, the next one on my list is you have to have a Neil Adams book. And this one is it for me. Now, the earliest Batman comic that I read was drawn by Don Newton and written by Danny O'Neill. But it had Ra's al Ghul and his daughter Talia in it. And it was my introduction to the Batman comics and their world. And to this troubled soul, this troubled duo of Talia and Ra's, which to this day remain my favorite adversaries of the Batman. And of course, Talia's in love with Batman. He never calls him by his name Bruce or Batman. She calls him Beloved in the comics. But in any event, what Neil Adams did here, the way he portrayed the physicality of the men, not too overly muscular, not too cartoony, very realistic. And the way he drew women was absolutely stunning. I think it made me think of what it must have been when Marlon Brando entered the stage on Streetcar Named Desire back in the late 40s, and just all that testosterone, sexual potency on stage. And that's what you see with Neil Adams. And this cover has always just enchanted me. I had quite a few of these over the years of the Spider-Man comics, the early Ditko and Lee stuff, but I sold them all a while back. But I kept one, and that is this one here. This cover, I saw reprints of it as a kid in Marvel Tales, and it always just enthralled me. Like, what's happening here? When I finally read the story, what this is about, it's about Spider-Man, Peter Parker. He needs to get this medicine to Aunt May, who's in the hospital. She's dying. And he has to go through a gauntlet, literally, to get it to her. And this here in this comic, there's tons of steel are just towering over him. And he's about to give up, but he thinks about her, that he has to do this to save her. But this covered by Ditko, and these beautiful colors. And this man here who is just, it looks like he's at the end of it's the end of him, but of course it's not, because the panels inside of him lifting these tons of steels to get back to Aunt May and save her. And what she does is just remarkable, remarkable storytelling. More by Ditko, I think, than it is by Lee. But that's a whole nother video. But it's beautiful cover. Okay. I've lost count of the list, but just bear with me here. Now we come stuff that's strictly for the covers, because the interiors are not that great, but the covers are just mesmerizing. And this is Sukiya. Sukiya is an Italian comic, but this is a Spanish language translation. Now, the covers, I forget who they were done by, but they are, let's look at this. If she looks familiar, that's for a reason. When I saw these, I'm thinking, she looks like Ornella Muti, who I first saw in Flash Gordon as a kid. And that's one of the reasons I like that movie so much, because of her. And I'm thinking, that can't be Ornella Muti. And yet, it is Ornella Muti. At least, I'm going to be quick about some of these videos. There's Ornella there. And definitely, that's her right there. Now, it's my understanding that the artist for the cover page, did this, and I think the comic was over 100 issues. I have maybe like 20 of them. And what it is, she's a vampire. It's a ripoff of Vampirella, but the interior is not even close to the beautiful artwork in the Vampirella books by Warren Magazine. But certainly, I think of all the covers, this is probably the one I like the best. You have this sheik and his harem, but you have this woman here, just in the foreground, just staring right at you. And again, she enchanted me when I saw her in Flash Gordon. There's a scene when Flash is flying a ship, and Ornella shows up, and then she sits on his lap, so to speak. And this was my early introduction to the erotic, before I knew what it was, but I got a good idea of what was coming as I got to my adolescence. Now, speaking of my adolescence, or before then, is between age 7 and 8 and age 13 when I really began to read comics. And I was introduced to Mexican comics first, which I'm about to get to. But I was reading, of course, a lot of the Warren magazines and such before I got to the superhero comics, the American ones. But once I did, I was also introduced to the non-superhero comics. And one of the earliest was Heavy Metal Magazine. Now, Heavy Metal Magazine was an adult science fiction and fantasy magazine which reprinted European work for the most part. And this cover here, Magnus pretty beat up. And this is the introduction of Ranxerox. This is by Liberatore. Every once in a while, one of these issues would get put on the newsstands. Normally, they would be with the Playboys and the Hustlers and the Penthouses behind the counter. And I would be up there, and I would buy these until I got caught by a clerk. So this is a better cover here, nicer edition here. Now, it's called Ranxerox because he's made of Xerox parts. And this takes place in an amoral world. His girlfriend's a heroin addict. She's like 13 years old, 14 years old. I think we meet her here. But the colors in this thing are astounding. This is a nihilistic world. There are no heroes in this at all. Not at all. It's it's ultra violent, but it's remarkable. In one of the storylines, before I knew who J.G. Ballard was, before I had read Crash, they do a storyline with Crash where a man wants to die in a car crash and have an orgasm. But this cover here, I remember when I saw it, it was behind the counter with the Playboys. But I had gotten an earlier issue of Heavy Metal, and I had seen him already, and I wanted this issue, and I couldn't buy it, And so it frustrated me. So eventually I did get a copy. But it's funny, you can see in regular American comics people getting shot, thrown off buildings, very violent. But you show any kind of sex or a woman's breast, it's the end of civilization. But Liberatore, my good, look at that. Stunning. Stunning work. Now, in those same years of heavy metal, I was introduced to Luis Garcia, right here, and Nova Dos. Now, Nova Dos was again, it was a reprint of a European comic by Luis Garcia. And it's initially it was going to be a science fiction story, but when Lenin was assassinated, Luis Garcia decided to change it, and it became a story about disillusionment of his generation, of people who had hope of the 60s were going to change the world for the better, and in many ways they did, right? But maybe the idealism for many, when it didn't work out the way they wanted, was just a little bit too much. So this is a masterpiece of what Luis Garcia did. And this is, again, from the early 80s. This is a stunning piece of work. Didn't mention that I have a comic book channel. I now link it below if you're interested. But I've discussed this book in that comic book channel. Well, actually, I think I've linked it also in my channel, this BookTube channel as well. But this cover here is very arresting. A man at the end of his throes. Just giving up on life. But it's an incredible piece of work. Okay. So now we get to our last two books. Again, if I miscounted, I'm sorry. Now, one of the earliest comics that I do remember reading as a kid in Mexico was Calimán, and another one was called Fantomas. And Fantomas is based on several influences. One is these French pulp novels stories from the early 20th century about Fantomas, who's actually a horrific person. He's a criminal who does just terrible things. So anyway, the creators of Fantomas, which is a Mexican comic, which takes place in Paris, and the hero lives in Paris, they took the name, but they were influenced by Lee Falk's The Phantom, Mandrake the Magician, and Diabolic, an Italian comic, to create the Phantom. I mean, Fantomas, I'm sorry, Fantomas. If I said The Phantom, I'm sorry, it's Fantomas. Finding a cover for this was tough because there are so many good ones here. Now, who is Fantomas? Fantomas lives in Paris. He is a very cultured individual. His assistants are all women, and they're named after the zodiac. The stories are not your typical superhero comic in the Fantoma storylines. One of his most famous, and this issue is very hard to come by. Let me get to it here. Is this one here. Now in this issue, what you have is an organization has made it possible for all the great books of world literature to disappear from every library. The Gutenberg Bible, the Divine Comedy, Don Quixote, they're all gone. Now, that's where Fantomas comes in. And in this issue, he calls his friends to help him. Who does he call? Who appears in this comic? Julio Cortázar, Susan Sontag, Alberto Moravia, Octavio Paz, and I think Carlos Fuentes as well. And to try to retrieve these things. This comic would all include these people in the comic. In other stories, Picasso appears, Sigmund Freud appears, Karl Marx appears. In response to this, Julio Cortázar wrote this little novella, Multinational Vampires, Fantomas against Multinational Vampires, where he took, clippings from the comic and inserted them in here. Now, the comic didn't ask permission to have Julio Cortázar in it, so Julio didn't ask permission from them to do the same for his little novella here. Fantomas is unlike any other comic I've ever read. And in it, again, the women who assist him, he's not involved with them. They're all in love with him. But in the comic, Bo Derek appears as one of his women that he has affairs with. Carla Cardinali. He's got an interesting one with Jane Fonda, where they're watching a Luis Buñuel film, The Exterminating Angel. Linda Carter is another one. They're on a beach together. Now, I don't know if Linda Carter was married in the early 80s, but if she was, she's having an affair with Fantomas on a beach somewhere in Cuernavaca. Bridget Bardot. And again, his friends are the intellectual elite of the world. And so Fantomas, though, has one thing, he is a thief, though. He does steal. That's the one thing he can't control. He has to steal beautiful things. So some of those paintings you see at the Louvre are the forgeries. Why? Because he has the original. Oh, and I still haven't shown my favorite cover. My favorite cover is this one here, because it captures the essence of Fantomas. He like the Phantom. The Phantom rarely takes off his mask. Fantomas never takes off his mask, and his origins are all over the place. I think it ran for over 600 issues. I have maybe about 300 of these, and they are just remarkable stories, absolutely remarkable. And another storyline, Norman Mailer appears. I mean, it's again, it's unlike anything I've ever read. Anyway, so this is number 2. So finally, number 1, and it goes back to heavy metal magazine. Now, when I was a kid, looking through the magazines, there was one, I think it was a portfolio, or it may have been this book. And this picture just completely drew me to it. But it was very expensive, and there was no way we could afford to order it. But I already knew this artist because of heavy metal. His name was Mobius. And for most Americans who did not read heavy metal, they became familiar with him. They were Marvel readers when he drew this story with Stan Lee about the Silver Surfer. And it's a beautiful work by, I think mostly it's by Mobius. Extraordinary piece of work. Right? And I had seen the heavy metal film as a kid. I was able to see it when it was on HBO. And again, I was reading the magazines whenever I could. But my number 1 comic is this one here. This picture here by Mobius. I think she is called, I think, the Star Child or the Stargazer. I don't remember. Let me take this out of the Mylar here. This is hard to get, and it's going to be very expensive. But it's this that just absolutely mesmerized me as a kid. And over the years, I would see it. And this is why I like comics so much. Not just the superhero comics, but just comics as a whole, as you've seen here. From the comic strips to just this incredible work here by Mobius. And I'm just grateful, for heavy metal and all the, everything they've given us over the years. So this is it. My top 10. The other ones, I'm not sure where they are with the ranking, but I'm pretty sure this is number 1. The Art of Mobius. Again, it's the Star Child, Stargazer. I should know this, but does it matter? It's like looking at the stars with this woman here. Thank you for viewing.